The moment the narcissist parades their new relationship feels like a dagger to their former victim's heart, triggering waves of rejection, inadequacy, and confusion. Yet this seemingly cruel replacement represents something entirely different from what the wounded ego perceives. It's an unwitting liberation from a psychological prison that would have continued draining life force indefinitely. The new person hasn't taken anything of value. They've unknowingly volunteered to carry a burden that was slowly destroying someone else. This shift in perspective transforms the narrative from painful rejection to fortunate escape, revealing the new supply as an inadvertent savior rather than a victorious rival. The transfer of a parasitic burden. The narcissist's intense focus on new supply creates the illusion of having found something better, but in reality, they've simply located a fresh host for their parasitic emotional needs. Their former victim had been depleted to the point of exhaustion, their emotional resources drained by the constant demands for validation, attention, and psychological labor. The new person arrives with full reserves, making them temporarily more capable of meeting the narcissist's insatiable needs. This transfer of focus doesn't reflect any deficiency in the previous victim. It reflects the narcissist's desperate need for someone who hasn't yet learned to recognize their manipulation tactics. The former victim had developed immunity to love bombing, skepticism toward empty promises, and resistance to guilt trips. They had become too psychologically educated to remain effective supply, forcing the narcissist to seek someone still vulnerable to their well-practiced performance. The new relationship's intensity actually confirms what the former victim needed to understand. The narcissist was never capable of genuine love in the first place. They're simply repeating the exact same pattern with a different person, proving that the problem was never about their former partner's worthiness, but about their own fundamental inability to form authentic connections. The inevitable cycle begins again. The former victim's feelings of inadequacy stem from witnessing what appears to be the narcissist's capacity to love someone new, creating the painful question of why they weren't enough to inspire that devotion. However, this perception mistakes the narcissist's initial idealization phase for genuine affection. The new supply is experiencing the identical love bombing that once dazzled their predecessor, complete with grand gestures, intense attention, and promises of eternal devotion. This initial euphoria will follow the same predictable trajectory. Idealization will gradually give way to devaluation, as the new person fails to maintain the impossible standard of perfect supply. They'll begin experiencing the same manipulation, emotional abuse, and psychological warfare that the former victim endured. The cycle doesn't reflect improvement or genuine connection. It reflects the narcissist's inability to sustain any relationship beyond the superficial honeymoon phase. The former victim's advantage lies in their knowledge of what comes next. While the new supply basks in temporary adoration, believing themselves special enough to have changed the narcissist, the former victim knows the inevitable decline that awaits. This knowledge transforms their perspective from, "Why wasn't I enough?" to, "Thank goodness I'm no longer in that position." The gift of involuntary freedom. The narcissist's new relationship, though initially painful to witness, serves as the forced catalyst for the former victim's complete liberation. Many victims struggle to maintain boundaries or resist hoovering attempts when the narcissist experiences supply shortages. The presence of new supply removes this temptation entirely, creating space for genuine healing without the constant threat of manipulation attempts. This forced distance allows the former victim to process their trauma without interference, rebuild their sense of self without the narcissist's distortions, and rediscover their worth without someone constantly undermining it. The new supply has unknowingly taken on the exhausting role of managing the narcissist's emotional instability, allowing their predecessor the precious gift of peace and recovery time. The painful irony becomes clear with emotional distance. The former victim spent years trying to be enough for someone fundamentally incapable of satisfaction, while the new supply's arrival proves they were never the problem. The narcissist's pattern of serial relationships demonstrates their inability to sustain genuine connection with anyone, regardless of that person's qualities or efforts. The new supply didn't win a prize, they inherited a burden. The former victim didn't lose value. They escaped a psychological vampire who would have continued draining them indefinitely. What felt like devastating replacement was actually involuntary rescue, freeing someone to finally discover relationships built on mutual respect rather than parasitic consumption.